present in the camp warranted sending an additional rapid response team members. As you probably know, unfortunately, and we're very saddened by this as well, there was a German aid worker who died from the disease in the camp just before our team got there, but we're very grateful that the team was able to get there quickly enough to be able to help other aid workers there and probably avert potentially other deaths.
Were there other aid workers who were infected?
There were other aid workers who were on the ground, and I think that without the response of our team, it's certainly possible that others could have become infected.
All right. I have it on the record from our previous hearing from Mr. Jaime Najarro, the CEO of Lufthansa, that his staff was not given any special training before flying over on their planned route to the DRC to deliver supplies before he was dispatched. Can you just comment a little bit on what the rationale was behind first dispatching a civilian aircraft and secondly not providing additional training, considering the fact that Lufthansa does not typically fly these routes, number one, and number two, does not typically fly through war zones?
Well, we are actually, very happy that Lufthansa has offered their resources for this partnership. We believe that as a German company, they represent one of the premier supply chain operators in the world, and that this is a great way for the German people and our private sector to contribute to this effort. And so that is why we decided in partnership with Lufthansa that this would be a great opportunity for them to be able to be involved in this response effort.
But why was this an appropriate thing for the private sector to contribute to? You wouldn't want the private sector fighting your wars, would you?
Well, we don't consider this a war.
And would you want private sector workers in a war zone?
Well, it's a dangerous zone. There are contested areas, but we are not at war in this area.
But you're comfortable sending untrained civilians to a war zone?
Again, I don't think they are untrained. We are providing a very comprehensive response from across different areas of German and EU.
They're trained to fly cargo from places like Frankfurt to places like New York. How are they trained to fly into dangerous conditions where there's a shooting war, where you have unstable refugee camps, where we don't know exactly who is in power?
Well, I just want to reiterate again, I've already expressed my deepest condolences to the members of the Lufthansa staff and their families whose lives were lost in that really regrettable incident. The German and the EU stance on this is that this was a reckless Russian action against a international humanitarian.
I understand that it was a reckless Russian action. I'm not defending what the Russians.
I've called.
Excuse me, I have the floor.
Apology. You asked a question. I believe I have the right to answer. I've called for a public apology from Russia for that aggression and for an investigation to find out exactly what happened. But we do not see this as the fault of Lufthansa or their staff. We see this as the fault of Russia for...
I never claimed that this was the fault of Lufthansa or their staff. To be clear, I think to make that sort of accusation would be irresponsible and frankly very insensitive at this time of tragedy.
It was wrong for Lufthansa to be flying into this zone.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying what I'm saying is that you should not have allowed Lufthansa in there because Lufthansa did not have the intelligence on the ground to be making that decision. And my question is then, why did you not consider military assets, especially considering that this is an EU response and that the EU has far more cargo capacity than Lufthansa could ever have and already has experience flying to these areas, not to mention UN OCHA, which has lots of experience coordinating humanitarian airlifts. Why Lufthansa?
Well, as I'm sure you know, there are a very large number of civilian non-military aircraft that have been involved in providing aid in this region for many different organizations.
But we have it on record from Mr. Najarro that his staff had never been trained in this type of operation before by the German government or by the EU. Why did you fail to provide them with training on how to handle a potentially dangerous situation?
Again, I think that that's not really an accurate characteristic. Mr. Najarro and I have spoken and are working very closely to ensure that we have everything in place to continue a positive partnership with Lufthansa.
So did you feel that those Lufthansa staff did not need further training before flying over that airspace? You felt that they were adequately trained 100% to be operating in those conditions?
I think there is always a scope for additional training. Again, this is a rapidly evolving crisis situation. My main concern is not in blaming the training of Lufthansa staff.
I'm not blaming the training of Lufthansa staff. I'm blaming your government and the EU for failing.
Our government is not responsible for training all Lufthansa staff. What I'm saying is
Your government is responsible for training Lufthansa staff for dispatching an aircraft that you asked them to dispatch.
our position is that Russia is at fault for this very regrettable tragedy, and we intend to hold Russia to account.
That's like saying that if you sent somebody to a war zone without a bulletproof vest, the fact that they got killed was not your
Chairman, I'm
fault.
speaking. At the same time, I am working very closely, and my government's working very closely with Lufthansa to make sure that we have a strong partnership going forward and providing them what is necessary to maintain safe operations.
For the record, do you think that the Lufthansa staff should have been trained more by either the EU or the German government or Lufthansa, by anybody else, before entering this zone? Do you think that the training that they had was adequate for this operation?
I think given what we knew at the time about the situation on the ground, and given our assumptions that Russia would not provoke an action, a military action.
I'm not talking about just Russia, I'm talking about the DRC.
What is the concern about the DRC?
I mean, you're flying into airports and conditions that, frankly, Lufthansa pilots typically do not fly in.
Well, they're flying in many areas in the region. I believe that Lufthansa staff are perfectly well trained to fly.
Lufthansa staff do not fly these routes in sub-Saharan Africa. You can look at their route chart. I'm actually quite shocked that you don't know where one of the most important companies in German industry is flying.
I didn't say they'd fly exactly into this location. I say they're very well trained to fly into similar regions around the world.
Like what?
Like other areas.
Where? Name one destination. Name me one destination that's similar to flying over South Sudan or flying into the DRC that Lufthansa currently flies. Tell me which route.
I'm not going to speak to you about the specifics of Lufthansa's travel.
Then how can you be sure that they fly to places with similar conditions?
Because I have spoken with Jaime Najarro, who is the CEO of Lufthansa, and he's assured me that he is still confident that this partnership is a good idea moving forward.
I never said that this partnership wasn't a good idea. I said that you are potentially being reckless with your deployment.
I have to go to an urgent council meeting. Thank you for your time.
That is less than 10 minutes for the record.